So you just told us that you have over 30 years of experience in the field. So a big improvement.
Yes, and I was no longer needed in that direction. So now in that sector, I was no longer needed.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. Welcome to Africa's LSP Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Gihozo, and today we have a special guest, Madam Esther Milenge. Welcome, Madam Esther Milenge. We're glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You can start by telling us a bit about yourself. Where are you? Where are you based? How did you get started? You have a really interesting background whereby you went from journalism training in the 90s to becoming a top interpreter. Please do feel free to share any fun facts about your journey.
Right. My name is Esther Milenge, or Esther Milenge, and I'm Rwandan. I am a conference interpreter. I was not always a conference interpreter, but let me start from the beginning. I began as a bilingual secretary, but I always knew in my heart that I wanted to be a conference interpreter. But along the way, I applied to be a proofreader in a major newspaper in Kampala, and I got the job. So this is how I got into the information and communication industry. And then I got recruited by an organization in Kigali to come and be the information and reporting officer. And it is during this time that I got to experience to a large scale translating and interpreting, because as you know, in Rwanda, we speak Kinyarwanda, English and French, and we were getting so many visitors from the donor organizations, and I had to escort them. I was their point of liaison, and it involved a lot of translating and interpretation. But let me go a bit backward. Before I moved to Rwanda, I had gotten the opportunity. My very first interpretation assignment was when Her Excellency, the First Lady of Uganda, Madame Janet Museveni, was receiving a guest, the First Lady of Benin. At the time, that was Her Excellency Madame Rosine Soglo. So they were looking for a bilingual interpreter, and someone asked me if I could do it. And I went through the process, and I applied, and I got the job. So just to make a long story short, that was 5 days of interpreting as a novice. I was very new on the job, but I enjoyed it. That's how I was really introduced into the interpretation industry. So fast forward, I am working for this NGO, and I am meeting so many journalists and visitors from the donor countries coming to see how Rwanda was progressing from emergency to development. So I did a lot of interpretation and translation. So the desire was growing in me once again. And I have some very good experiences there, but eventually I had 2 children, one following the other. And so I decided to resign to raise my babies, because I had 2 babies and it wasn't that easy for me. So it was while raising my children that I started thinking about conference interpretation. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I decided, to be bold and approach. Those days, the biggest provider was Symposia Consult. So I approached Symposia Consult and asked if I could be tried out. And I really thank the owner and founder of Symposia Consult, because they gave me a go. They tried me out, and I was allowed to train with them. And I actually began my journey in conference interpretation with Symposia Consult. So I'm very grateful to them. And in fact, I still remember a lot of the Symposia Consult has a very hands-on approach on training their new interpreters. I still remember a lot of the advice and tips I got. So it is while working for Symposia Consult that I was noticed by the African Union. So yes, it was something actually simple. We were working in a big conference for ministers of justice for Africa. So that it was a African Union meeting. So the head of the team approached me, took me aside and asked me if I was interested for working for the AU. So I gave him my CV, and actually I had to wait a bit, but after a few months I was invited. And I jumped. You can imagine, I jumped at the chance, and that is how I began working for the African Union as a short-term or freelance interpreter. But of course, in between, I was working for other clients, the IMF, some UN bodies, a lot of ministries back home, I already had I had acquired a little experience. Yeah.
That was an amazing journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So you just told us that you have over 30 years of experience in the field. Can you please give us like a brief overview of like English and French interpretation in Africa? And if possible, tell us if maybe any requirements have changed ever since your first job in 1992.
Actually, I think there has been a few changes from what I've seen. Because as I interpreted, as I began to interpret on the international scene, at the beginning, it was mostly one booth for French, one booth for English. And if there were other languages, there was one booth for Arabic and Portuguese. But I have noticed as I started working outside of AU, because sometimes I was at home. When you're freelance, you're not always in Addis, you're working at home as well or other places. As another need was growing, the other event organizers needed interpreters who could do what we call bilingual booths or bilingual interpreting, who could go just as well into English as they could go into French, or just as well into Arabic as they could go into English. Of course, the individual providers don't have the same resources as the bigger organizations. Yeah. So I learned very quickly that I needed to up my game and begin learning how to interpret into French. But that was happening all over Eastern Central Africa. And I got to meet very many who had become accustomed at doing that. And mind you, you may be bilingual or trilingual, but if you don't have that experience of interpreting into the different languages, it doesn't come that easily. You really have to learn how to do it. You need experience. You really have to do it for a while before you become comfortable. That's one thing that I noticed. And then we have a lot of young interpreters, especially here in Rwanda, who have come on the scene. And then one interesting thing, when I started out, we had a lot of clients coming from abroad, including the IMF, because Rwanda was primarily Francophone at the time. So I used to escort the IMF mission and other missions that came around the ministries and around wherever they wanted to go, because there was a lot of work. But eventually, as you know, Rwandans learned English. Yeah. And there was a concerted effort, and definitely an effort in the public service to enable Rwandans to learn English. So slowly, within the space of about 3 years,
you saw a big improvement.
Yes, and I was no longer needed in that direction. So now in that sector, I was no longer needed, but it's a good thing. Yeah.
Was it English to French nowadays?
No, I continued working, but I was no longer working with those clients that needed to liaise or work in close collaboration with the government bodies like banks or ministries. That was another change. And then, languages evolve. It's not enough to say you're fluent in one. You really need a lot of experience. It takes a lot of hard work to get by, to interpret professionally, to have a smooth delivery. Yeah, for now, I think that's it. So yeah, and also it's becoming more and more important to have at least 3 languages. When I started out, many of my colleagues had 2 languages, but it's much better if you have a third language.
Very interesting. So any requirements have changed other than?
It's not a requirement per se, but you are more marketable, especially on the international scene, if you have a third language.
That's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
So could you please kindly emphasize the importance of clear bilingual communication for business growth and economic activity when you're working with like large organizations like African Union or any other international or continental body, please?
Okay. I think that's a very important question. And I think that is also at the heart of the work that we do, not only at the AU, but also while working with many other international setups or organizations. When you talk about business growth, I think about the member states of the African Union working together to achieve certain common goals. And they can be economic, they can be medical, they can be academic, and many others. And I can give the example of, for example, the time when the African Union was setting up the AfCFTA, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that is where it's in fora like those that you see how important the work of interpreters is. We see it ourselves. Normally we take it for granted, but it's in fora like those that we see it. And the more diverse the audience, the more diverse the interpretation team as well. So in those very big meetings, we will have several languages. And I don't know if you've heard of the relay function. If someone if a key speaker on the floor speaks in French, then I'll interpret it to English. But there'll also be interpreters interpreting into Spanish, Arabic, possibly Kiswahili, Portuguese, of course.
Mhm.
Yes. The main languages are English, French, Portuguese, Arabic,
Swahili.
and now we have Swahili and Spanish as well. So sometimes the relay function, which is the interpreters who have to interpret into other languages but take from one of us interpreters. We call them the relay, the group. You have to be clear so they can interpret from your voice, from your delivery.
Especially because that's critical works.
Yeah, it's very, very important. You cannot. Yes, we're human beings. We make mistakes. But if, for example, we have difficult speakers who are speaking maybe too fast, or there's an accent that you don't fully understand, that actually does happen. But it happens less the more exposure you get. And then if for one of those reasons you fail to complete a sentence, I learned this myself the hard way. You have to complete your sentence. Don't leave it hanging.
No short sentence.
Okay? No incomplete sentences. You have to complete your sentence so that the interpreter taking from you into Arabic or Portuguese is not left hanging. And we call those fillers. You find a neutral way to complete your sentence. So that's just an example of how we need to work together. We need to liaise. We liaise with them. For example, at the beginning of the conference, we try to ascertain which languages will be used, who are the main speakers, what languages, do we know what language they're going into? We have to make sure that the equipment is fine. We have to test. So because you were asking about how important it is important for business growth in Africa and for all those common goals to be achieved, because I gave the example of African Continental Free Trade Area. You have teams from all over Africa seated in one meeting hall, and they're going over all the minute details of, let's say, tariff barriers, prices of commodities, so many areas of the economy, a lot of things, their own country requirements, laws, legal hurdles to go through. So you really have to do your work well so that they can work, because they will break out into teams, but they're diverse teams. They're speaking different. So they depend on your work as an interpreter so their meetings can go smoothly.
Does that mean, for example, like interpreters, prior to like any meetings, you guys get to mingle and talk so that you get used to each other, sort of like test each other? Maybe you can notice that this person has a strong accent, this person does not, or like, you check documents, any of things, something like that, anything of that sort.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. It's very important to go over the key meeting documents. We usually have copies of the key meeting documents, and it's very, very, I can't emphasize how important it is. It's very important to go over those. The earlier you do it, the better. But talking of our colleagues, usually as an interpreter, by the time you're an interpreter, you know the importance of speaking clearly and with as neutral an accent as possible. So usually the problem of accent will not come from our colleagues. When it happens, it will usually come from the floor. Okay? So I'm afraid I don't have any ready recipe for that or remedy. It just comes through practice and a lot of experience. It's like your ear gets trained to getting and understanding the different accents. In my case, the difficulty was in understanding some of the West African countries, but it comes with practice. You get the hang of it. Yes.
So what are some trends that you have noticed in the current African interpretation market? You did mention that there's now a shift to remote work ever since the COVID-19 pandemic. How has that changed your day-to-day work?
Yes, that is true. when the pandemic hit, there were a lot of changes, of course, because of the lockdowns across the world, including in Africa. People started using RSI, that's remote simultaneous interpretation. There was a need to have interpretation that didn't require people traveling, interpreters traveling to the site and so on. And this was happening, I believe it began at the UN and then it spread all over. And we're using Zoom as the main app or medium. And it wasn't easy at the time. At the beginning, I used to hear of a lot of hitches. And I think it also happened a few times on our end, on the African continent. But you were asking about the changes, right?
Did you do what?
There are a lot of changes. Okay, some are welcome and some may be not so easy to deal with. I'll start with the ones that are not so easy to deal with. This is tech. This is tech, high tech for some. And of course, we had to learn anew. And I am very grateful for those we had some colleagues that took it upon themselves. Shout out to Ashraf, our Ethiopian colleague, who took the initiative to have regional trainings for all for regional interpreters in Eastern Africa. And there were so many approaches were made. The AU, for example, made sure that their technicians, before every meeting, we had checks. We have always had checks, even before COVID, even before RSI began. But now it became even more important. So there were always checks before the meeting started. And talking about what may not have been welcome, of course, this is distance. Yes, we can see each other. We can see them on the screen. But there's the technical glitches. We all had to learn. Many people made mistakes along the way. And then this was during COVID. Okay, for many people, there were a lot of difficulties being experienced. Work sometimes came to a standstill. A lot of things happened. This happened all over Rwanda, I believe. And all of a sudden, we as interpreters, as regional interpreters, we had to make sure we had backups of everything we're using, because this is what you need to have a seamless, a very good flow of remote simultaneous interpretation. So we were taught to have a backup of everything that we need. We needed a backup of our laptop, a backup of the headsets that you're using. You needed a backup of the internet connection. So, for example, if you're using MTN, you need to have also Tigo or something like that, or one of the private companies that. And then I also learned that it was better to use a laptop than to use a tablet
or a phone.
Some people started out with phones, but that affects the sound in a big way. So we had to learn a lot of things, or relearn for those who were already IT conversant. And now the good things, you're usually working from home. If your home is noisy, you have to find somewhere to go, but it's not like you're going to have to jump the suit and you just look for a quiet place and work. Here's another hazard. Sometimes there's family, there's noises, planes overhead, workers making noise, people's telephone. Yeah, so you have to really guard against that. And for me, work comes first. It's my priority. So really, as a conference interpreter, you should spare no expense. You really should spare no expense to make sure you're giving a good delivery. Your audience doesn't really have to listen to your background noise, to your planes, to your children or stuff like that. So really, you should spare no expense. I know colleagues who actually set up their own booths at home.
Wow.
Using cardboard boxes, some using glass. And I really think it's commendable when it's necessary. So you really have to work at. And then we learned a lot technically and electronically. We learned a lot. That's what happened. Yeah, and I would advise for those who are new in the field, I would advise them to use, for example, from my experience, Logitech headsets are the best. There are others which are not so easily found on the local market and may be more expensive abroad, but Logitech is what we have here in Rwanda, and it's very good. Yes, and good functioning computer. And I believe we should observe the protocols. We learned protocols about noise, about you have to obey the protocols, then you'll get a seamless delivery. Yes.
So do you think a reliable internet connection and electricity, which is a major problem on the African continent, was an issue for some interpreters, for example? Because this was done via online. If you don't have a stable electricity or a stable internet connection, that might be challenging.
Now, if this was the case, because when you're in a meeting and maybe the very few times that an interpreter has had a problem of connection, you have no way of knowing the cause for it. But I do believe that when interpreters come across a technical glitch, they will do everything possible so that it doesn't happen again, because it's affecting your work. The audience also, some members of the audience, some participants also came across that problem. But I think by and large, people learn how to get by and how to prevent such problems from occurring. I remember even now, sometimes some people are participating from their car, from their vehicle. Yeah, they're participating from their vehicle. There's no background noise, but they will do everything to make sure they attend the meeting. And I think I could commend that as well.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a quite interesting work ethic that I think most of us could aspire to have.
Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about the audience, not the interpreter.
Yeah, thank you. Additionally, you did mention that you have worked with the African Union for almost 20 years now. What are some common mistakes you see new interpreters or event organizers make at these big meetings, and what can they do to avoid them?
Okay. I'll start with the easiest, maybe, with event management. And here I'm also referring to other big meetings I've attended, not necessarily those organized by the African Union. So for event organizers, they have to be there at the beginning of the meeting to make sure they will deal with any problem that arises, because anything can crop up, anything. Different side meetings may be required. More interpreters may be required, and then especially the technical pitches. Something may go wrong with some of the equipment. Maybe more microphones are needed. Sometimes there's a problem with the room. Maybe they need more room for the smaller workshops. So the event organizer should be there at least at the very beginning, because sometimes some of the decisions to be made concerning those contingencies can only be made by the chief event organizer. That's for the event organization. Now for interpreters, some of the mistakes that are made by newcomers, well, you should try to avoid being late.
Yeah.
I say that first because I was also an offender at some point, and it's very good to come on time. Normally, we are required to be there at least 15 minutes before the meeting starts, but apparently 15 minutes may not be enough, because there's a lot to do when you come early. You can go over the documents, because the documents we get in advance are not always all the documents that we need to read. So you get more documents on site where the meeting is taking place. You need to be there for testing of the equipment, and to relax. Because once you have read through the major documents and so on, then you have time to relax. When you come late, you panic, and that's not good for your delivery. So you have to relax so that once you have read most of the documents, then you have time to concentrate on your delivery. Because I would like to remind the newcomers to the profession, it's not just the content, what you're saying, that matters. It's the way you say, it's the delivery. It's always nice to regulate your voice, not shout or be hoarse, but don't shout. Regulate your voice, and then try and go with the speaker. Try and follow his or her tone, and then try to nuance your voice. And with newcomers, many people forget to nuance.
Yeah.
So it's much nicer to have, if you're following the speaker, you try to mirror his tone or his or her tone, their mood, and so on, instead of having a monotonous. Yeah.
It can't sound boring.
Well, at least it's better. It's much better when you nuance. So when you have enough time, when you have had time to relax, then you will remember and have time to work on your delivery. Yes. And then there's also another phenomenon that occurs with newcomers to the profession. You're looking for a word.
Yeah.
You're looking for a word, and you know you have it, but you somehow can't put your finger on it. Now, when you're relaxed, you're more likely to find the word.
That's true.
Huh? It happens so many times. You've been panicking, and then when you're out during the break, you say, "Oh, why did I?"
It's that word.
That word. Yeah. So you're more likely to do it well when you're relaxed.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I think that's about it.
Okay. Yeah. So as you know, artificial intelligence is quite a hot topic right now, especially regarding how it's going to affect the language industry. With all your practical real-time experience, what is your honest opinion on AI's role in terms of real-time translation and interpretation?
Well, that's actually a big question. How do you call it? The $1 million question.
It is the $1 million question.
I think most interpreters have addressed this question, at least to themselves. And it's true, AI actually happened.
It happened.
But what I would advise people is, at least for now, I don't think there's any reason to panic. I think right now, we have more to gain from AI than to lose right now. I think we have more to gain because AI is actually assisting right now. Because a lot of our apps that we use to enhance our delivery, both during RSI, remote simultaneous interpretation, and on-site meetings when we're there, a lot of these apps help us a lot. I mean, you're sitting there, but when you have your computer open, you can very quickly check. If you're interpreting, you can continue interpreting or slow down as you check for that word that you didn't get, and then very quickly factor it into your delivery. Now, those electronic gadgets that we use, or those apps that we use, have been enhanced by AI. A lot of them have been enhanced by AI. And, our electronic glossaries have come a long way. I remember right from the beginning when I was starting, we used to use something called Termium.
Okay.
And then, they changed, and then others came up. And, as a new one is coming in, you'll hear colleagues saying, no, that one is not good. It has this and this problem. Or that one, no, it's not speaking real French. It's speaking Canadian French. Those kinds of claims. Yeah. Then you go to the next and the next and the next. And right now, I like Lingue. Lingue, some people call it Langue, but it's Lingue. And it works with the different languages, except maybe I haven't seen it with Arabic, but it works for English, French, Spanish, German. And there are other apps that are coming up that have been enhanced by AI. I've heard of DeepL, and I've heard of Interpret Bank, which I hear is more or less affordable for our regional interpreters, because I think it has a one-time subscription fee, and then you have it for life. And there's another one, so that's Interpret Bank, DeepL, and others which are there. So I think right now, instead of stressing ourselves over the fear that AI has come to take our jobs, AI has not yet taken our job. Yes, the machines are there. AI is working. I have personally witnessed two businessmen, a Chinese and a Rwandan, using a machine-aided interpretation. And I actually asked the Rwandan, and he said it was working well, but I was not panicking. It will take a long time for AI to take over our jobs completely, because our jobs are not just about delivering the content.
There's a human factor.
There's a real human factor. And interpretation is broad. It's broad, it's multidimensional. It doesn't only take place in conferences. It takes place over dinner. It takes place during a trip of between two VIPs or two tourists who are visiting a country whose language they don't know. There is whispered interpretation, chuchotage, what we call chuchotage, whispered interpretation, where you sit behind two and gently whisper. It's multifaceted. And I don't know whether AI has been able to cater for that as of now. So the human factor, as you say, is very, very important, and it is still relevant. Officials who are meeting with their counterparts from different countries really need that human factor. They want it to be done well and seamless. And and the more professional the interpreter, the better for the work that they're doing. So I think it will take some time before if at all, they take over. So I would advise, in the meantime, we shouldn't run away from AI. We shouldn't avoid learning how to use AI.
We should embrace,
especially for people above a certain age, generation, sometimes we joke among ourselves. We say there's the generation that's born before computers. BBC, and born after computers. Those are our children and the other generations. So we shouldn't run away from AI. We should learn to use it to our advantage. However difficult or technical it might seem, there's always a way to learn. You can even learn on YouTube tutorials.
Interesting.
That's how I see it for now.
So AI is here to replace interpreters?
I think it's here to replace us, and I think we should take advantage of AI for now.
That's a very interesting opinion.
Yes, that's my opinion.
It is interesting because most people are now frightened that they're going to be replaced at the job market. Not only interpreters, like almost everybody's panicking.
Oh yes, that's true. I get phone calls from relatives and friends teasing me. Are you ready? AI
is going to take over your job.
Yeah, but being in the language field, I think there's a lot of things you can do. And I know that many interpreters, as time goes on, they develop other interests, not necessarily alternative, but they develop, some going to farming, some become writers, some start their own companies to do other things, some going to event management. There are lots of things you can do. We should rather take advantage of what AI has to offer.
And don't fear.
Yeah, fear just isn't good. Like I said, in interpretation, panicking is bad. So I think the same goes for ordinary life outside of the book.
Yeah. Fear is the enemy.
Yeah, fear is the enemy. You can put it that way.
We are unfortunately at the end of this episode, and Africa's LSP podcast has a large audience of young language professionals. Can you please share a final message of advice for them?
I'll do it with honor and with pleasure.
Okay.
It's been a long ride. It hasn't been a walk in the park. It's been rough.
For 30 years.
It's been rough. My first message, be prepared to work very hard. You have to work very hard. There is no shortcut. You have to work very hard. Now, 3 important points, apart from having to being ready to work very hard. Don't panic. As I said before,
fear is the enemy.
Yes, panicking. They're not necessarily afraid, but they're panicking. Panicking is an enemy of a smooth delivery, of a professional delivery. And then secondly, we get a lot of free time as conference interpreters, as you know, especially freelance conference interpreters. There are in-house conference interpreters who go to the office every day, but I am a freelance interpreter. So we get a lot of free time. Even when I go to the AU, there are free days in between, or other international organizations for other international interpreters. Try not to waste that free time.
Practice.
It is not actually free. That's the first thing you have to learn. You think it's free, but it's not free. Work. I would advise new interpreters to go to the meetings and watch seasoned interpreters at work. There's a lot to learn from them, like the way they employ in-house jargon. You learn a lot of in-house jargon, or the way they say things, the way they address eminent personalities, the way they address and the in-house jargon, and the way their copying mechanisms, the way they copy, for example, very fast speakers, things like that. There's a lot to learn from watching them. And there's always somewhere you can watch them. You could slip into the meeting room if it's possible. If it's not a very VIP meeting, sit at the back and use the equipment to listen. Or if that's not possible, if it's a very high-level meeting, you can go to there's usually 1 or 2 empty booths and sit there, get the gadgets and listen and learn. And the third, and also, and not the least piece of advice is try to work with integrity. I would advise upcoming interpreters to work with integrity. There are so many temptations, especially when you're young.
Yeah.
Here, I'd like to give as an example what we in the field call moonlighting.
Yeah.
You're working, you already have a contract, you're working, and a friend, a colleague or a close friend says, can you help me out? I'm supposed to do this meeting, but I have to rush. Come and do this. Or do this and I'll pay you. And that is dangerous. It might look easy. You may get away with it once, twice, or 3 times, but at the end of the day, you will get caught.
You get a reputation.
Yes, it is not worth it. If at all you get rewards from that, maybe you get increased pay and so on, that doesn't last. But the damage to your reputation, the damage to your professional image can very easily last. And I'd like also to share something I learned. I did some business studies in my youth. They say, treat your customers, all of your customers well. Even that customer who will come, let's say you're a freelance interpreter, there are customers who call you and who invite you to service a meeting, and you work for 5 days, 3 days. Then there's that customer who will ask you to service the meeting of 1 day. And maybe those opportunities are few and far between. Do not look down on them. Do not disappoint them. If you have, now this is also very important, and I have seen this happen along my journey. There are colleagues who, you have a meeting for 1 day, and then along comes an offer for 5 days, or even 2 weeks, and you're traveling. That's fun. You're traveling. Do not give in to the temptation and say yes and disappoint. Because I learned in my business studies that very often that one client who you think is giving you very little, because that client usually comes back and back, especially if you're working very well. At the end of the day, you'll find that you earn up to 45% of your annual salary from that one client who doesn't give you very, very lucrative offers. So I would advise them to work with integrity. Those are my 3 pieces of advice. Don't panic. Learn from the seasoned interpreters. And don't waste the free time that you have. Study, read, and work with integrity. Yes, that's it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was very nice. Yeah, thank you.
It has been wonderful talking to you, Madam Esther Milenge. Thank you so much for sharing years of experience with us. Your time with us has been truly valuable. Thank you once again for your time.
It's I who thank you. It was an honor. Thank you for having me.